All right, we're diving into World War II today, but we're not talking about the usual stuff. Forget the tanks, the battleships, the dogfights over Europe. We are going way off the beaten path to explore one of the strangest, most ingenious, and ultimately one of the most tragic secret weapons programs of the entire war.
Okay, so picture this. It's late 1944. You're out in the countryside, maybe in Oregon or Montana, could be even as far east as Michigan. You look up at the sky and you see something weird, a giant, silent sphere, just drifting way, way up there. It's not a plane, it's definitely not a weather balloon. These mysterious objects were starting to pop up all across North America.
So what were they, and where in the world did they come from? Well, this was the beginning of the first ever intercontinental attack on the United States. An invasion carried out not with soldiers or planes. No, it was done with paper, some hydrogen, and the wind.
To really get a handle on this bizarre weapon, you have to rewind the clock about 2 years. See, this whole thing wasn't really a story of conquest. It was a story that was born from a deep-seated desire for revenge.
It all started in April of 1942. The Americans completely shocked Japan with the Doolittle Raid, a super daring bombing run right over Tokyo. Now, strategically, it didn't do a whole lot of damage, but psychologically, oh, it was a massive blow. The Japanese Imperial Headquarters immediately ordered anyone, to develop a weapon that could hit back at the American mainland. And out of that desperation, an old, almost forgotten idea was brought back to life. The Fugo, the paper balloon bomb.
But here's what's so revealing about the whole project. When you look at interviews done after the war, you find out that even the Japanese army didn't really expect the Fugo to be some kind of game changer. Its main purpose was actually propaganda. It was a way to boost morale at home, to show the Japanese people that they too could strike the enemy thousands of miles away.
And that leads us to the absolutely incredible engineering challenge they were up against. I mean, think about it. How on earth do you send an unmanned weapon over 6,000 miles across the biggest ocean on the planet using what was basically 19th century technology? This is where the ingenuity just goes off the charts. The balloon, this giant weapon, wasn't made of metal or advanced rubber. It was made of washi, a traditional Japanese paper stuck together with, get this, potato paste. The whole thing was lifted by hydrogen and kept its balance with 32 sandbags. And to assemble these massive paper envelopes, thousands of teenage schoolgirls were mobilized to do the work. It's this incredible mix of really simple, low-tech stuff and this wildly ambitious goal.
So, what was the secret sauce that made this whole crazy idea even possible? It was a fairly new discovery in meteorology, the jet stream. Japanese scientists had figured out that there was this powerful river in the sky that could whisk a balloon from Japan all the way to North America in just a couple of days. It was the perfect invisible highway for their weapon.
Okay, but there was a catch. At night, the hydrogen gas inside the balloon would cool down, making it sink and fall right out of that jet stream. The solution they came up with was just brilliant. They used a system of aneroid barometers to act as an altitude sensor. If the balloon dipped too low, a tiny gunpowder charge would fire and blow off one of the 32 sandbags. The balloon would get lighter and, whoosh, right back up into the current. It could do this over and over, all by itself for the entire trip.
And just take a look at the device that pulled this off. This whole complex contraption held the bombs, a self-destruct mechanism, and of course, the brains of the operation, that clever altitude control system with its barometers and fuses. It was, for all intents and purposes, an automated intercontinental weapon system built out of paper, sand, and gunpowder. Incredible.
All right, so the balloons are launched, they float across the Pacific, but when they get to America, what happens? Well, for the Japanese, the answer was absolutely nothing, just silence.
And we're not talking about a handful of these things. The scale of this operation was huge. Over about 6 months, Japan launched over 9,000 of these balloon bombs. The hope was that they would start massive forest fires and just cause widespread panic all across the American West.
But here's the thing. Out of more than 9,000 balloons launched, only about 300 were ever confirmed to have made it to North America. It was a really, really low success rate. But the ones that did make it, well, they were scattered over a huge area.
And just check out this map. It really shows you just how far and wide the ones that did make it were scattered. I mean, they were found from Alaska all the way down to Mexico, and from the Pacific coast clear over to a suburb of Detroit, Michigan. The silent invasion was real, even if it was a pretty sparse one.
So why the silence? Why did the Japanese think their plan was a complete bust?
Well, it was because of an incredibly clever countermove by the United States, one of the most effective media blackouts of the entire war. The government basically asked newspapers and radio stations to just not report on the balloons at all. No news reports meant no feedback for the Japanese military. They had no clue if a single balloon had ever made it across.
But even with all that, there was one moment that is just unbelievably ironic. In March of 1945, one of these balloons came down and its dangling lines short-circuited a power grid. That grid just so happened to be supplying electricity to the Hanford Engineer Works, the top-secret facility that was producing plutonium for the atomic bomb. You heard that right. A paper balloon from Japan briefly interrupted the most advanced, most powerful weapons program on Earth. You just can't make this stuff up.
So the whole program eventually fizzled out as a failure, but it wasn't without consequence. In fact, the Fugo campaign left behind a legacy that was both tragic and really surprising.
This is where the story takes a tragic turn. Remember that media blackout? Well, on May 5, 1945, a pastor's wife named Elsie Mitchell, who was pregnant at the time, was out on a church picnic with 5 children in a forest near Bly, Oregon. They stumbled across one of the downed balloons. As they went to investigate it, the anti-personnel bomb it was carrying exploded. They became the only people to be killed by enemy action in the contiguous United States during all of World War II.
After that tragedy, the press blackout was lifted immediately. The government had to warn the public about the danger, and today this monument stands at that very spot, a somber reminder of the strange and unpredictable ways that war can reach across oceans and touch the lives of innocent people.
So why did Japan pull the plug on the whole thing? Well, it was kind of a perfect storm of problems, really. They were starting to run out of hydrogen and paper. That U.S. censorship campaign meant they were completely blind to any results. And because they launched in winter and spring, the American forests were too damp to catch fire anyway. With the war itself winding down, they launched the last balloon in April 1945 and just abandoned the project.
But here is the final takeaway. And you gotta understand, this is a big deal. As primitive, as almost silly as it seems, the Fugo was history's first intercontinental weapons system. This goofy-looking paper balloon, floating on the wind, was the direct conceptual ancestor of the weapon that would come to define the Cold War, the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, the ICBM. It proved the terrifying concept that, yes, it was possible to attack a target an entire ocean away.
So when you look back at the Fugo, what do you see? A weapon of desperation? A totally ineffective tool of propaganda? Or a brilliant marvel of low-tech ingenuity that actually foreshadowed the future of warfare? You know, the most accurate answer is probably that it was both. A truly strange, fascinating, and bizarre footnote in the history of the Second World War.